everybody. My name is Andy Kim.
And I'm Katie Martin. We are from Twin City Bible Church in Urbana, Illinois. And today we want to talk about how many of our churches are in communities that are changing rapidly. There's a lot of flow through of people coming and going because of university and industry. And in that context, it can be very easy to let conflict go because people are coming and going. It can be an easy out to not address and not have conversations about things we really need to talk about. So that's what we want to talk about today.
Yeah, and one of the things that we found for our church, being a 90-year-old church, is if you don't address conflict early on, or if you get used to just people leaving and moving away, and that's how you deal with conflict, over time those conflicts become resentments and bitterness, and over years and even decades, those conflicts start to fester. And what we've experienced as our church is the painful reality of conflicts that have stretched out over decades, that have festered into deep seeds of bitterness, resentment, division, while we're all in church together. And so some of our learning as a church has come at a great cost of pain, but how to actually handle conflict biblically. And so we just wanted to share some things that we've been learning, recognizing that conflict will look very different in different contexts, different cultures. So here are just some things that I think have worked for us that we hope can encourage you and your church. I think one of the most important things for us as elders in our church has been the realization that we never had a clear understanding of how the biblical principles of conflict would play out in an actual process that we could point to. And it was so important for us when we were like in the midst of realizing that we had some conflicts in our church that were really explosive, but also had decades worth of conversations. We needed a process of having conversations, confrontations, and then moving towards reconciliation and restoration and justice. And so for us, one resource that was very helpful was this book called Pathways to Peace by Jim Van Yperen. And just a quick summary of what we learned were some biblical principles from Matthew 18, 1 Corinthians 5, that start with a personal examination of where do you see whether you've sinned against someone or you've been sinned against. Encouragement for our congregation to have private conversations, and if those conversations don't arrive at an agreement, to bring in an overseer, spiritually mature witnesses who can actually lead. But then if that doesn't work, to actually bring that to the leadership, where the leadership would hear all the sides and hear from spiritually mature witnesses and come up with a plan for reconciliation and restitution. And if one of the members aren't willing to participate in that plan, to actually move forward in Matthew 18 and 1 Corinthians 5 and actually call that member to repentance. And if they still don't, then to actually remove them from fellowship.
And one thing that was interesting for me to see, both as a leader and for me personally, when you apply these principles, not just from the leadership level of the church, but you equip each member to know how to go through these steps. You give them a framework of how to have conversations with their brother or sister if they've been hurt or if they've hurt someone. Then small conflicts stay small conflicts. They can get resolved with a conversation instead of building up over weeks and months and years and decades. So we are seeing those fruits happen in our church because we're equipping people to know how to go to their brothers and sisters in a biblical way, and they have steps to follow or a process that leads them to not get stuck when the conversation gets hard or the first conversation doesn't go well. They have another step, they have help, they have the body around them to surround them and support them in doing what God has called us to do.
And just as an encouragement to leaders and elders and pastors, we found it was so helpful to have a fully fleshed out, biblically informed process of conflict resolution, all the way from one side, private personal conversations on one side, all the way to public church discipline on the other side. And knowing that although we hope that the church discipline doesn't happen often, that as leaders there are times where we need to be prepared, and actually that is a beautiful biblical part of being the church is doing just and loving church discipline. So one of the verses that really ministered to us during this time was Hebrews 12, where that God disciplines those that he loves, his children that he loves. And so taking that seriously as leaders, that one of the ways that we can practice the Father's love is by practicing church discipline in a biblical way.
Being connected to Ethnos means that we're not an island by ourselves anymore. It is so exciting to us as a 90-year-old church, and as members, newer members of this church. It's exciting to know that we're not just by ourselves. There's other people around the globe doing the same things that we're passionate about. So that's exciting to know that we have that connection.
Yeah, and I think for being an older church that sometimes gets focused on our history in good and bad ways, to be around churches that are younger, our church plants, it's been so invigorating to us, and almost feeling like we've gotten new life by being here, new breath breathed into the vision that we've always had to reach our campus and our community. But just being around other planters and other leaders has just totally expanded my view of what our church could be like. Even though there are some ways that we've always been the same, that there's new possibilities in God.